So last week was Microsoft Ignite 2020, a fully online event. I'm joined by Tom to talk through some of the IT Pro and dev stuff. So I don't know about you, Tom. I was kind of a bit heads down on the developer side of things. So I'm hoping you got some of the IT Pro stuff. I thought we could
Yeah,
do
vice versa. Yeah, me and Tom haven't had any chance to catch up between now and Ignite, so this is basically our catch up but recorded.
Yep, absolutely. And so for me, it certainly felt like a fairly developer focused Ignite. I'm not sure kind of how you sort of felt things were going.
Yeah, I mean, just generally Ignite as a whole, clearly Azure and platform is a big topic for Microsoft. So I think Teams as a product is one of the exceptions actually, where they're still just churning out tons and tons of features. But more generally, you can see even Ignite traditionally, the more IT Pro conference is becoming a bit more developer-y, platform, Azure-y.
And that's interesting. So I think it'd be interesting to go through some of like the top 5 things from an IT Pro side of the fence. And for my side, I can talk about the top 5 kind of developer things I picked up on that I thought were really interesting. Yeah. So should we start with the developer pick?
Yeah.
If you like?
Yeah, you go developer first.
Perfect. So one of the things we've heard sort of coming for a while, I think it was announced at Inspire, is being able to bring things inside the meeting. So developer experiences inside meetings, which is kind of really interesting because obviously we're spending a lot of time in meetings at the moment. But like some of the tab stuff and some of the web page style things that you see in tabs, you'll be able to bring those into meetings. You'll also be able to interact with the chat in the kind of pre and post meeting thing. So you'll be able to like put in agendas and follow-up actions. And also really interesting, what are called kind of task dialogues, I think they're called, like almost like a pop-up above the content, so like really obvious in front of all the video for like filling out questions or like feedback and things like that. So that's really interesting because it kind of drives meeting kind of experiences, which is
I think it opens up some potential for things we just couldn't do before as well. So like you say, like surveys that are very overt and in your face, or polls or questions or background content, you can see where this could go in a few years. It's like, well, the meeting can pick up the audio, so it can start highlighting tasks or answering questions, or you've already got the transcription, so you can see what I think this is just the first step of what we could do within meeting experiences.
Yep. So for me, that was like a fairly big deal on the developer side. So convinced me that it was a good Ignite for IT pros.
Yeah, well, so definitely a good Ignite for users. So the first one for me is Microsoft Teams meetings recordings will now be stored in OneDrive and or SharePoint. So SharePoint if it's a channel meeting, OneDrive if it's any other meeting. And that's a really big deal because certainly if you do a lot of meetings and you share the recordings, today they go into Microsoft Stream. Microsoft Stream doesn't have any native sharing, so you have to download it to OneDrive and then share it anyway. But also it just makes sense because you've now got all the benefits of retention policies and APIs and audit logs and everything else that you get in SharePoint and OneDrive. You're going to get those for free for your meetings recording. So I think it's a smart move.
That's cool. Nice. Yeah, that's really interesting. One of the interesting things again on the developer side, like, was to see the investment they're making in the bot framework and the bot side of things. So this is not technically Teams development, but all this stuff is interlinked, and bots are a massive part of how users interact with legacy applications and third-party applications inside Teams. So it's good to see lots of effort still going into the conversational AI kind of team and the side of fence there. Lots of improvements to bot framework, which will make it easier for people to get started. Lots of skills and investment in skills, which is really nice. I saw some really good skills actually. There's called a calendar skill, which you kind of can just drop into your bot, and it gives you like access. It connects to your calendar, and then you can just schedule a meeting with Bob and Lucy from finance, and it knows that it looks through their calendars, picks the right time. It's everything you'd want in like a nice scheduling bot. But as a developer, you don't have to write it all from scratch. You can just drop it in as a workload, and it can kind of sit alongside something that's very kind of application specific or business specific, which is nice.
And are they bringing that world and the kind of Power Platform world closer and closer? Because there's a lot of Power Platforms that I haven't got to watch back yet, but it just felt like Power Platform is poking into that world more and more.
Yeah, definitely. So it was at last year's Ignite, they announced not only the bot framework Composer, which was like a UI to build bots, but also Power Virtual Agents, which is another low code, no code way to build bots.
Yeah.
This time around, they talked about some more focus on kind of bringing those two worlds together. Under the hood, they're actually very similar, but yeah, there were definitely some things being announced to make it easier so you could have a team of developers writing bot framework skills, and then Power Virtual Agents being used by more citizen developers, kind of business specialists, and making it easier to just drop in those skills from your IT team for something very specialized alongside the kind of the business process flow stuff, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting to see those two worlds kind of getting closer and closer together. And like you say, there might be a case where you have kind of the citizen developer in the business and then the dev team backing them up to do the last mile of something complex, but they're just plugging the gaps around the kind of frameworks.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah.
Cool.
Absolutely.
So another IT Pro one is webinar registration and reporting. So this was quite a surprise, actually. We do a lot of webinars, obviously, and you can't really do webinars on Teams today. So we do lots of community events where it's fine. But if you want registration and registration emails and reporting of who attended and how long they attended for and stuff, that isn't in Teams natively. But now they're adding this as a genuine webinar-like functionality. So registration emails, collecting the registration, sharing the URLs, the event stats afterwards. So just pushing into that space a little bit, which is new for Microsoft.
That's interesting. Yeah. It's weird. It's interesting to see Teams evolving into these different kind of workflows and different almost verticals for like meeting, I guess, the demand and where the demand is.
Yeah, my answer was always Teams is an enterprise platform. It's not perfect for webinars because it's an enterprise comms platform, but like other competitors have that as a module or a feature. So clearly, it's not a lot of extra work. The media thing is there. It's just the top and tailing. So clearly, they're adding that in, which is good.
Yeah, it's nice. It reminded me of something else on the kind of developer news around some of the low code, no code, and the Power Platform stuff. We saw, I think, for the first time, a proper walkthrough of Project Oakdale, which is this was kind of talked about Inspire, but it's taking a Power Apps application, or that you can build in Power Apps. One of the problems with this is around data stores, right? And it's bringing that data store in Teams.
Yeah, I'm confused as to how this ended up in Teams. Like, it sounds like just a data storage platform.
Yep.
And I'm guessing the Teams team happened to have built it because they want it, but it doesn't feel like a Teams feature to me. Am I not understanding that?
Yeah, you're right. Teams is an odd place for it. I don't know if under the hood it's SharePoint. Maybe. I think that was it's not been said that SharePoint.
Yeah.
It feels maybe that's not quite right either, because I think they would have talked about direct SharePoint. It's not quite a list structure. It's more of a relational database. Yeah.
If it was called like Power Database Lite, like I'd be like, cool, because Power Platform, that makes sense.
Right.
But it's like it's Teams, which just seems odd.
Yeah, like there are some advantages in terms of kind of governance and reliability. Like, it's where users are, like IT have already signed it off. Maybe it's just like less hoops to jump through. You've already got it. You've already got it deployed. You're already licensed for it. It's kind of where your users are consuming it. Maybe it makes sense. But yeah, you're right. On a technology level, it's a slightly odd place to think of having as your data store, for sure. Although I guess conversations and kind of content and chat and files is, if you leave files aside for a second, there's a big data store there.
Yeah, I guess that was the logic. Is like we want more of this stuff in Teams and it needs a storage layer. Here's one. But like I assume if you're developing something that's nothing to do with Teams, you can still use Project Oakdale as your storage layer or not?
No, so that you can
so
use
it is
Oakdale
tied to
Power Apps that you access in Teams.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, you
so
have to be in
type.
Teams to access it. Yes.
So it's not a generic storage platform. It's for Teams Power Apps.
But yes. Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. Yep. Yes, that was kind of interesting to see that as a walkthrough, because we haven't sort of previously seen it. We've heard it talked about, but yeah, it's good to see that, because it means it's imminent. So that's good.
So does that mean the other Microsoft technologies are all going to get their own storage layer for Power Apps? Like if you want to build a SharePoint one, where do you put? I guess you put the data in lists then, don't you?
You got it in lists in SharePoint, haven't you? And maybe that's where it came from. Like, you can do it in SharePoint, you can't do it in Teams. Everyone is spending more and more time in Teams. That's the gap should fill. So yeah.
Cool. Okay, another IT Pro one, boxes, actual physical boxes. So Microsoft Teams Survival Branch Appliances. Again, a couple of years ago, I wouldn't have said this was coming, but this is a local box you put on site that provides survivable telephony for Teams. So if your WAN link goes down, your internet goes down, your connectivity to Microsoft goes down, service goes down, whatever, your telephone number keeps ringing inbound and outbound. We've deployed like hundreds of these in the past for Link and Skype, so it's often a requirement, like legally, that a site has to keep its telephony up when other things go down. This ticks that box basically.
And it's just telephony, right? It's not like a local cache of Teams.
Yeah, exactly. So Teams has or imminently will have an offline mode, depending on current where it is in dev cycle, but it goes to an offline mode where you can see your cached local data, and that will now include telephony, and they're working to include on-site VoIP calling. So obviously, if your internet goes down, but you have people on different floors in the same building, you could keep VoIP calling them as well. But it's like a basic resiliency scenario. It's not Teams server. It's not chat. It's not your Teams. It's not a cache, anything like that. It's just telephony at the moment.
Okay. Well, that's still good. That's nice. Yeah. And is that, do you think that's just in response to enterprises needing it, more and more enterprises rolling on Teams?
100%. There'll be a bunch of Skype environments that have tens, if not hundreds of those, and they'll say, no, legal requirement is we need telephony to be up for definite, and our internet in these countries isn't great, or your service level is 9.99 for the cloud, 99.9 for the cloud, 3 nines, and we need 5 nines telephony, that kind of thing. So there are some use case. I think it's less and less, way less than in the Skype days, but clearly still, with Teams as big as it is, there's a market for those appliances.
Cool. There's lots happening. I think we've done 4, so we've got one left. I've saved my best till last, which is the Azure Communication Services announcement, which was a bit of a kind of came out of nowhere, really, and is not technically out of the Teams platform group. It's from Azure, but I think it really impacts Teams and impacts Teams developers. So I think it's worth talking about. It's top level. It's a way for developers programmatically to set up SMS, chat, voice, video, voice over IP, calls and group calls, so meetings essentially, using exactly the same underlying stack that Teams uses, but in a programmatical way via nice APIs and libraries, so you can build it into web pages, you can build applications around it, and kind of the underlying kind of stuff that makes Teams run at scale reliably and securely is now something that you can spin up as an instance in Azure and write code against.
This was probably the biggest potentially impacting announcement at Ignite, actually, is that you can essentially use Teams as the back-end Teams engine as a platform for your audio, video, chat, sharing, SMS. I guess, will they probably add telephony breakout to that at some point? Was that part of the conversation?
Yes, if by that means you can like have a phone number which you can call, and then like you get told about it, you can do stuff with it. So you can, I'm not quite sure exactly what you'll be able to do with it yet, other than like answer it and do something with it.
Yeah, but I mean,
somewhere,
like customer support for your you could build call queues, your own version of call queues or whatever potentially.
Yes. Yeah.
I think that's really huge. Like, it's interesting that Microsoft will build a first-party service and offer up their platform for third parties. Obviously, they're not thinking about people building competing UC platforms. Really, it's about bringing UC into those other apps, like a CRM system or a Salesforce or something like that. I think Dynamics was the example they used, like bringing AV directly into Dynamics as a service.
And I think one of the things that came out in going through the sessions, like at the moment, it's quite separate from Teams. There's no like natural overlap. I think that's something that's coming. Like, it's a very obvious next step that you'd want to be able to join a communication services group call from Teams, and maybe vice versa as well. But at the moment, they're kind of two separate things. Like Teams is like an implementation using communication services. It's not completely the same thing. So yeah, but yeah, I think that definitely super disruptive. For things like
it'll be interesting to see what the uptake is. I guess it's kind of Twilio type competitor.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So another kit one from me. So Microsoft have or had now Microsoft collaboration bars, which are Android-based room meeting systems, kind of designed at the lower end huddle space, and they had Microsoft Teams rooms based on Windows, which scaled to bigger spaces. They've decided branding wise and feature wise they want to bring those closer together, so now they're going to have Microsoft Teams rooms for Android, Microsoft Teams rooms for Windows, so same brand, different devices being the underlying OS is different, but also bringing a lot of the features and functionality. So Android was the lower end in terms of experience and functionality, but they're putting in a lot of other experiences into the Android to make it similar to the Windows edition. So good for buyers, good for companies who like the Android units, like the low overhead of them, the cost point of them, but want the extra functionality.
That's cool. Yeah, is that available now or like coming soonish, or like is there
so the units are out already and they were called collaboration bars, so really it's just a rebrand, but all the features are dropping over like last quarter of this year and kind of going into Q1. So the Android edition is still behind the Windows edition functionality now, but you'll see them kind of parity up. There'll be a couple of things Windows can do that Android can't because of OS limitations or just the raw hardware you can put in a Windows box, but by and large day-to-day functionality, screen layouts, proximity join, mobile control, they'll be the same on both.
Oh, nice, cool. Turns out I can't count because that was 4, and so I haven't saved the best till last, just the penultimate. So I think the other thing
I was wondering what you were going to announce was the top ACS.
No, sorry. This is kind of interesting though, actually, and I picked it up from a IT Pro session that I was eavesdropping in on around the Teams Admin Center, and that is that it kind of looks like you'll be able to license specific Teams applications soon, because built into the Teams Admin Center, coming into that, is this concept of being able to purchase kind of licenses for applications, which I think is really interesting because that's not something you'd be able to do up until now. And I think it's a really good thing for Teams apps because it will ensure that quality bar and the breadth of.
And is this a distinct app store from App Source? So this is another app store?
No, it's the same one. So that monetization process is in or coming to App Source.
Right. Okay.
So this was a Jamie Stark session. So like he went through that process of like, here's the application, I can see the license, I can purchase the license, takes me off to App Store, I can complete credit card payment there, it shows up in the Teams Admin Center. So yeah, so that's kind of huge for developers who want to charge money for their applications. It's kind of hard to do that right now unless you do it as part of a service or some other app. So yeah,
that's really exciting. You'll see a lot of that will attract a lot of developer talent and a lot of kind of indie, more developer like 5, 10, 15 person shops that can solve a problem. Like if you're Salesforce or whatever, you can build your Teams plugin and just take the hit, but if you're building for specific purposes, it'll be good to have monetization right in there.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Cool. So my number 5 is customer managed encryption keys for Teams. So not a super sexy one, but good for some particular use cases. And the reason for it is obviously all your data in Teams is encrypted anyway, but Microsoft control the keys. What this brings you is the ability to bring your own keys to the service. It's been around for ages for things like OneDrive and SharePoint and Exchange, but not for the chatty elements of Teams. So the files on SharePoint you could do this with, but not the kind of your actual Teams content. And the reason for this is not really to keep the data away from Microsoft. It's that lots of regulatory industries have a requirement to bring your own keys and prove you've terminated the data when you leave the service. So that allows you to say, I own the encryption keys at all times, and I can prove that the data was deleted from the service when I leave. So it's another one that hits some regulated industries that probably have to be on server today for that reason, that could bring them to the cloud now.
Is that available for anyone? Can anyone do that? Do you have to be a certain
Yeah,
size? Or...
so you have to have E5 or the advanced compliance SKU to do customer key anyway, and it's preview this quarter, probably GA next quarter. So it's a higher end requirement, definitely.
Yeah, it's interesting to see these additional things being added on, I guess, as kind of Teams is expanding out, you know, larger, more regulated industries moving over.
Yeah, it's definitely a maturity curve, isn't it? It's like, well, survival telephony and encryption, these are not everybody needs them features, but they're getting to the point where, and it's the drive to the cloud again. Like, what's the next blocker of all these customers who can't get to the cloud? Local telephony. What's the next blocker? Encryption, managing their own keys. So you can see they're just ticking things off,
chipping away. Yeah. Oh, nice. That's cool. Yeah, I don't know. Like, it felt like a fairly full-on Ignite in terms of session content, especially given that I think they announced this was the first half of, you know, a regular Ignite, and they're going to do another one next year. So this is supposed to be half the content, but it felt like a full-on week.
Yeah, there was enough announcements. I've still got a big backlog of things to watch. There was definitely a lot there. It was nice that it's all recorded and on demand. That took the pressure off a little bit. It's hard to sit at a desk and consume that much content in one go. And I saw a lot of tweets about people they're like, this is information overload. It's like, well, you can chill out a little bit and take it over a few weeks. Like, it's a lot of it's all coming news as well. So yeah, the content's all still there for people that want to watch it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Fantastic. Thanks for that. That was really useful. Like, I feel like I've got a good, speedy update on the IT Pro stuff.
We should record more of our internal catch-up meetings.
Yeah, it'd be good. Yeah, it'd be good. Thanks a lot.
Cool. Thanks.